Okay. I don't think so. Can you confirm that everybody who said they were going, okay.
There's 6 up there.
Yeah. Great.
Good afternoon. Sounds like everybody's all here, so we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome. I hit my mic. Is it not working? Okay. Okay. Where'd they go? There they go. All right. So I guess we got the declaration of interest. We didn't receive any, right? So adoption of the agenda. Need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I so move.
Glenn and Bev, I saw.
Second.
All in favor? Perfect. All right, first item is the approval of the minutes from our November 29th meeting. They were included in the package. Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes as presented? Poppy
I'll move.
and Bev. Any comments or discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Minutes are approved. All right. So now we have to do the election of officers. Did you want to? That's all we're doing? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move that Sally McIntyre be appointed as the chair for administrating the election for the Policy and Planning Committee. We need a motion for that? All right, we need a motion. Paul? Seconded by Kelly, Clark Kelly.
Great.
All right, it's all yours.
So I'm declaring the positions of Chair and Vice Chair of the Policy and Planning Committee vacant. And this election will be conducted in accordance with our admin bylaws. I'll first be asking for nominations for the position and chair. And once the chair is appointed, that person will request nominations for the vice chair. So I would like to open the floor for nominations for chair of the Policy and Planning Committee.
I'm the vice chair.
Sally, if nobody wants it, I'll do it again. I'm not jumping up for joy to have it. But I can't do it. It's just today was a really bad day for meetings for me, so I could not be in 100 places at the same time, I don't think.
Second Bev.
Okay, so I need to ask twice more. Any further nominations for the position of chair for the Policy and Planning Committee? Any further nominations for the position of chair of the Policy and Planning Committee? Okay, there being none, I declare Bev in the position of chair. Thank you very much, Bev, for taking that position on for another term. Okay, I'm not sure how we want to do this from a practical perspective because it's difficult for you to host from your position.
Maybe if we could carry on just as we are for this meeting.
Okay.
That would be really good for me.
Okay, so I will ask for nominations then for the position of vice chair.
I'll stay in.
So very good. So I have to ask twice more. Any other nominations for the position of vice chair? Any other nominations for the position of vice chair? Okay, and you accept the nomination? Very good. So very good. Well, I declare you the incumbent then in the position. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, that was easy. On to the Carp River floodplain mapping update. We have a report. Jurek?
Here we go. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Right. So the existing Carp River floodplain mapping dates back to 1983, and it's more than 40 years old and in a need of an update. Since 1983, there was a major development that happened in the upper Carp River watershed. New residential, commercial subdivisions in Kanata and Stittsville were developed, which really changed the watershed hydrological response. On top of that, there was a Carp River restoration project that took place in between 2016 and 18. And this project transformed basically more than 4 kilometers of the Carp River floodplain between, as you know, Hazeldean and Richardson Side Road. And this project is not reflected in the existing mapping. And again, on top of that, the study in 1993 did not analyze and did not identify and map slope erosion hazards. So that was not done back in then. So in 2022, MECA completed our flood risk assessment study, and this study confirmed Carp River as our highest flood risk areas in our watershed, and also rank this project among the top priorities in our floodplain mapping work. The project was initiated back in 2021 and is being completed in partnership and financial support from the City of Ottawa. So the Carp River watershed, as you can see on this slide, is our second largest river system in our watershed from Mississippi River, not counting Mississippi River tributaries, obviously. And in this project, we mapped the entire river. So basically from its upstream beginning and at Appaloosa Drive and Eagleson, all the way down to the confluence with the Ottawa River. So when we look at this, it's basically 50 kilometers of the river floodplain that we looked at and mapped. And this basically runs among the largest floodplain mapping projects that we've completed at MECA. And as part of this project, we've also looked at not only the flood risks, but also erosion hazards, unstable slopes, and meander belt hazard. So the approach that we followed, basically, we've been following closely existing municipal, provincial, and federal guidelines for floodplain mapping, and also standards, right? Established standards for floodplain mapping in the province. Listed here, the list grows every year. There are new technical guidelines, are being published. And also, I would like to mention that this project was subject to an independent third-party technical review process. So the study was basically reviewed, and then the comments addressed in the final deliverables. So this is we produced 47 map sheets. You can see an example on this slide for one. These maps, we use the latest DRAPE aerial images, and we also used detailed scale. These maps were produced at the scale of 1 to 2,000, so they provide really high detail, high resolution, as you can see, for like the floodplain in the Carp River. And important step in this project was validation. So we validated basically the modeling that we did and also our draft maps. We used existing stream flow data for the model validation. So basically we ran the model with historical observations, and then we compare the predicted flood extents and water elevations. We also utilized basically the floodings that happened at the time of the study. You can see on these photographs flooding from 2023, we were lucky because we had some good snowmelt event in the spring of 2023, and also some very good rain events later on in that spring. And what we did, we basically went to the field with our RTK system. We measured flood elevations. We also used our drone and did some aerial, basically surveys of flooding extents. And then we ran the model and we compared it with what we saw in the field. So this is just a few examples. The figure on the left shows the event from April 11th. This was a smaller scale event that was confined within the bankfuls, and we see that the model predicted it really accurately. The one on the right is the rain event from May 1st, 2023, for the area downstream of Hazeldean that actually filled up the entire floodplain. And again, you see that the observations, drone observations that we took in the field versus what the model predicts is pretty much dead on. So this all kind of adds additional confidence in the work we did and in our results. Now the public consultation process started in late March. We published a notice in, as you can see, Community Voice, Kanata South, North, West Carleton Online, Ottawa Sun, Ottawa Citizen, and then on MVCA website, social media, and so forth. We mailed letters to all affected landowners. We mailed out, I believe, over 500 mails to all the affected residents in the Carp River floodplain. And then the draft maps obviously were posted on our website for public review and comment. Then, we held numerous meetings with city staff, with public, with developers, with permit applicants to discuss, the draft maps and any implications. And then we held the open house on May 2nd in Kanata. So the open house was well attended. We had almost 60 people participating at the open house. We also had city staff and our board members and ex-members participating. So it was great to see the support for the project. So thank you. And during the open house, we received a number of comments, and these comments were all tracked and basically recorded in our system. The table gives you some overview of the breakdown of the comments. As you can see, most of these questions were related to implications on development and the permitting process, what can or cannot be done within the regulation limit or within the floodplain. And now the next step is basically, so we are almost at the end, we're just finalizing the maps, doing some last tweaks and the report. And once that's done, the plan is to present the study to the board for endorsement approval next month, and then adopt the study for MVCA regulation, and then share the mapping and the results with the city for inclusion in their municipal planning documents. So that's in a nutshell the update. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Yuri. Yeah. I see a question from Bev. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Good presentation and thanks for it. Now, I've just got to tell you that this is secondhand information, but I was at a farmer type meeting the other night, and some of the feedback that I was hearing was there wasn't a lot of farmers, and Clark, you might know more about this than me, at the meeting. And, it was, this time of year, farmers don't tend to open a lot of mail unless they have to, me included. And so there's a little bit of angst about this floodplain mapping and about some of the, information that was in there and how it's going to affect their farming. So I'll just make that comment, and Clark, you may be able to comment further on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually what I was going to comment about. So I was at a public consultation meeting the other night about the water rate review in the city of Ottawa, and I was approached by several farmers after because we were talking about water and drainage and whatnot. And I do have some farmers in my ward who operate along the Carp River who have lost uh, like up to 20 acres over the last number of years in farmable land because of the saturation of their land because of the Carp River. And I noticed you had mentioned, Yuri, at the beginning of your presentation, development in Canada and Stittsville. And the feeling amongst the farmers out here is very much that development has had an impact on their farming operations. So aside from my questions that are coming about consultation with agricultural communities, is the increased flooding attributable to developments in Canada and Stittsville?
Well, it's a complex question, and I don't think I have an easy answer for this because the Carp River watershed has very complex hydrological regime. We have the upper watershed that it's been developed, whereas typically the development in the province is happening at the downstream ends of water courses and whatnot, and the headwaters are kept in a pristine natural state. This is like the reverse of that, right? So definitely the development in the upper portion of the watershed is changing the response, but the data that we have is showing that we see the change mostly that the development in the upper watershed is making the upper watershed more susceptible to rainfall events, whereas the lower end of the watershed is still mostly snowmelt dominated. And basically, so the impacts of the development are kind of disappearing as the flooding propagates towards the downstream portions of the watershed. They are still dominated by the snowmelt event. So and also this is confirmed by the data that we have that the Water Survey of Canada, the federal province basically monitors at Kinburn, which actually shows no increase in maximum flows in Carp River. Actually, there is a decreasing trend in the flows, and this decreasing trend is sometimes attributed again to the fact that the snow in the upper portion of the watershed is melting faster because of the large paved areas and all that. So that's kind of hopefully this explains it a bit.
And then just following up on some of Bev's comments about the agricultural community's involvement in this conversation. And I know there were some comments directed towards me or questions about the consultation being held in Canada. And would you consider coming out to West Carleton to sit down with some agricultural people to continue the conversation with them, or has that ship already sailed?
Well, the commenting period is now over. I don't know if there are more. When we had discussions with individual landowners, farmers in the area, they raised concerns. And so we met with them, and we walked them through the process and explained that, actually, and the other thing is, most of the changes of this updated floodplain mapping versus the existing mapping from '83 is in the upper portion of the watershed. We see minimal changes in the lower watershed. So with the exceptions of the regulation limit that has changed due to the slope hazard that we didn't map previously. So we had discussions with the landowners and farmers from the lower end of the watershed, and I guess most of the concerns were in relation to that they may have perception that they might not be able to farm if their property is basically now within the regulation limit, which is not the case. Will have no impact on the farming and agricultural use of their lands.
Sally, did you want to add to that?
Thanks, Ray.
Yeah, I can just say that in some cases, people did subsequently reach out to us and Euro and his team have done a really good job, I feel, in terms of meeting one-on-one and addressing, individual people's concerns, producing maps specific to their properties, discussing through their specific questions and concerns. So I have, a high degree of confidence that those who did reach out to us with their concerns, we have addressed them as best as we possibly could.
Thank you.
Change. Has the old floodplain changed much to the new floodplain?
Again, there's some local differences, but it's very localized. We don't see a trend that, we have larger areas of the floodplain where, the new floodplain increased or decreased. So we see localized changes.
Well, that was my impression. It hadn't changed a whole lot.
No.
The only other comment I'd pick up on what you're asking, Clark, is that, and Euro spoke to this, is we are in a somewhat unique position in this location with having all the development in the upper portion of this watershed. And I don't know, Euro, to your knowledge, whether there's been a whole lot of research done on the impact of stormwater systems in the upper reaches of a watershed on downstream flows and patterns and the like. But certainly, it's been an issue that I know was raised for many years, actually, within the city of Ottawa, as the Highway 417 went out to Carleton Place and the like, and all the interchange changes that happened through there. So I do think it would be something worthwhile that at some point, if the board is interested in us pursuing this, that maybe this becomes something that we could research in time to better understand and quantify that, because it's a longstanding question that's been posed, I know, within the city.
Bev, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a real concern for the town of Almont and Pakenham to a certain amount. There's something in Almont called the Island that floods on a regular basis, and there was some walls and stuff like years ago that have really disintegrated. So any type of study that would be able to tell us what the future impact is going to be would be a really relevant to us. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen?
Throw the ball back to you, Clark. Back to you, Clark. The question or the buzz that was going a month or two ago was a special tax that was going to be implemented in the city. Maybe Glenn knows about this one too. Or where is it at? Where we were going to put a special tax on people that had paved driveways or more on the percentage of their lot that was covered with roofs or driveways for the urban area, because we weren't absorbing the water in the ground. Did that? I don't think that was met with open arms. Did that go away?
It hasn't gone away yet, but you're very right that it wasn't met with open arms. That's the meeting I was referencing a few minutes ago that I was at when the farmers were approaching me about this, because they do see it as being very much related. And yes, I would say it's an understatement to say it's being met with unopened arms. There's some anger and hostility that's been directed towards the city and me a little bit. So yeah, I actually have a meeting at 4 o'clock with the mayor about it. So that's to be concluded in 2025. They're just doing the review right now in public consultation.
You'll be probably talking about the new Rideau Valley floodplain wetland mapping at that meeting too?
That didn't come up.
It will.
Thanks, Stephen. Did I see your hand up, Bev?
Yeah, just for your information, Clark, and Glenn, it's hit the farming community too, and there's rumors out there that it's going to cost farmers hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to pay this special tax. So just so you're aware, they're gearing up.
Interesting. Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask staff, one of the big areas of change in the last 15 years, let's say, is the Carp River restoration. Did any of the results of the new floodplain, were there any anomalies or anything that was not expected as compared to what was planned from the Carp River restoration plan?
So the carp restoration basically, enhanced obviously, the Carp River corridor, but also created storage and for future development. And as part of the restoration project, there was a series of cut and fills that took place, and this was time delayed. So the cuts happen all at the same time during the carp restoration project, whereas the fills are still, within the individual landowners and developers, and might happen. Some of them already happen, some might still happen in the future. So obviously our mapping did not reflect, the all the future fills, right, that were accounted for in this cut and fill balance. So so the discrepancies we saw, was basically the existing condition versus, what will be the ultimate development of the Carp River corridor. So we had to address that in the floodplain mapping.
Okay, and then I guess as that work gets completed, it would be captured in the next cyclical update of the floodplain mapping. Is that?
Yes, that's exactly. Yeah, as like the individual developers will still need to be obtaining permits from MVCA for the work, and as once we receive the as-bills and we are all happy with it, then it will be the maps will be updated accordingly.
Okay, yeah, and I did attend the open house in Canada. I think I was there in the first hour of it, and it was absolutely bustling, and there was lots of staff from MVCA there digging right into maps and so on. They had the maps of the entire system laid out around the room, so you could actually follow it from Canada up to the Ottawa River. It was really well done, and there was some City of Ottawa reps there as well. And I know my observation was it's amazing. Here we are in 2024 using, I guess, LiDAR and the other technologies we have, and remarkably similar to 1983. So even with less technology, credit to the engineers and surveyors back in 1983 for the work they did, because it was very consistent in many areas, allowing, of course, for development and other natural changes that happen. It was still very closely aligned to what we saw here in 2024. So thanks to staff for your work on this file.
Thank you.
So any other questions for your? I think we're good, and there's no motion on this. This is for information only. Perfect. Thank you. All right, we're on to the land conservation strategy consultation package. This was a big one. Sally, you got a report for us?
Indeed. Okay, I'm gonna just pull up my, oh, I can't do that. How am I? I can do there. There we are. Okay. Can I move that out of the way? Can I make this there? There we are. Okay. So, this is one of the 6 deliverables that are due the end of this year. The land conservation strategy or conservation area strategy, the name, just so you know, is evolving. All the CAs are kind of in a quandary as to what to call it, because depending on your land mix, it's not just about your conservation areas. It's about a lot more than just your conservation areas. At the end of the day, what this strategy needs to address is it needs to provide policy direction from the board to staff on when are we going to acquire and dispose of land? What are our objectives related to that? What are the kind of programs and services we're going to deliver on those lands? how are we going to use our land assets to augment the protection of natural heritage, and how's that going to integrate with what you as municipalities are doing, or at the county level or the provincial level, et cetera. So it's a very important policy document, actually, that we're in the process of preparing, and there's any number of directions we can go. So the other piece that I just wanted to sort of telegraph to you in advance is that, so the second document that, second of many, that we're to produce this year is called a watershed-based resource management strategy. And this gets more into the programs and services side of things, but the two really go hand in hand. It begins with the land you own and then what you're going to deliver on those lands. And how you're going to, in this instance, it's talking about identifying and analyzing issues and risks, and then actions and cost estimates for addressing them. So many of the same questions that we're asking for the land conservation strategy need to be addressed through the watershed-based resource management strategy. So my first key message to you is that the consultation we're doing right now is going to be basically the consultation for both these provincial deliverables. Okay, so as you'll recall, we developed the inventory earlier this year because it starts with what land do you own or have a legal interest in. And so in addition to our dams and conservation areas, we have other lands that I had outlined to you folks in terms of, where back in the 90s, we acquired some land that was subject to regular flooding. We've also, used land to support our flood infrastructure, so our whole gauge systems and the like. We have a natural heritage trust in the vicinity of Appleton Wetland, and then we still have legacy easements in the vicinity on the Ottawa River for some erosion control works that we did at that back in the 90s. So I framed up the discussion paper around 5 key questions, and I don't know whether all of you have had a chance to look through it, but this is what I wanted to focus on with you today, is because these are the policy questions that we're needing to answer. So it starts with, are we in the conservation business? And if we're in the conservation business, what is our role there? And do we want to acquire more land for that purpose? And then once we have those lands, what kind of facilities are we, developing, and what kind of uses are we going to allow? And then the whole business about dams and, how we want to manage not only what we have today, but contemplate what we might be asked to manage in future. So the first set of questions revolve around conservation versus preservation. And one of the reasons why I pose this question is because if you go into any sort of parks planning documents, starting at the federal level right through, provincial and to your own municipal parks and recreation plans, you have a hierarchy of parks, starting with, your little kitty neighborhood parks, but right up to federal national preserves covering, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, where the whole goal is to preserve it in a natural state as best possible. And so, the difference between conservation and preservation is an important one, particularly given that as a mandatory program and service, it speaks about passive recreation. So it's very clear that our conservation areas are first and foremost intended for passive recreation, or just plain and simple, the conservation of land. So it would be really interesting to understand from people within our jurisdiction, as well as your municipalities, what role you see for MVCA going forward. Do you see a role for us in acquiring land purely to preserve it for posterity? Because a lot of CAs do that. If somebody comes along and wants to donate some land to them, and it's deemed to have, a certain natural heritage values, then a lot of CAs will accept that land and take ownership and assume management of those properties. They don't necessarily become a active conservation area where they develop it with a parking lot and trails and the like. It might just sit there forever and ever as vacant, undeveloped land in its natural state. So that would be a question I think we need to ask, because honestly, I have no direction in that regard. And when people come offering land to donate to us, we tend to just refer them to the land trust or to the local municipality or some other trust organization. So do we see MVCA doing that? As well, and let me just, we have the land we have today, but then do we want to expand on that, right? I'm just noticing in my presentation here, there's a bit of an error on one of the slides here. So I'm going to just keep going on to the next slide here. So when we also look at when we're acquiring the land, is it for ecological value or hydrological value or for recreational public access? So the hydrological function of a lot of land is of concern. I mean, I've heard just even in the discussion to date, on Euro's project, certain lands flood and they provide in a very important role in the hydrologics cycle, as well as in mitigating flooding and the impacts of drought. A lot of these lands are not developable. A lot of them, your own official plans designate them for protection. But there are other ecological values and functions associated with other lands that we might want to protect. You'll recall that when the province changed our mandate in terms of our permitting function, we no longer permit or have as part of our criteria the ecological functions occurring on land. But that whole service, the ecological services and functions, wasn't removed from our overall mandate. Our overall mandate still speaks about the management of natural resources. So it's something for us to think about going forward in terms of how do we want to, if we want to acquire more land, and what kind of land might we want to acquire, and then what kind of focus we'll have in that area. So it extends then to the types of facilities. Right now, most of our sites are natural heritage parks, I would call them, and parks because they're used by people. They're not reserves, they're parks. But we also have cultural heritage facilities, and you'll recall cultural heritage sites are not part of the Category 1 any longer. So we need to think about what is the long-term future of that asset at that site. And is there a role for our conservation authority moving forward in preservation or continuation of certain cultural sites within our jurisdiction? And you'll find more discussion in this, of course, in that context report. But I think what's important to understand is that we're actually unique in our watershed in that we, every year through now under this 5-year agreement that all your municipalities have signed, have a guaranteed source of municipal funding to help delivery, and operation of that museum. That's unique amongst the museums in our jurisdiction. None of them can say that. They have to apply year over year for their funding from a municipality, and they may or may not get it. And they more than likely only getting it from their local municipality. So it's a very unique service delivery model that we have right now, but it certainly has its advantages. And it's something I think at the county level and collectively municipalities should be contemplating in terms of how they want to manage their heritage resources going forward. Because I think there's an opportunity there, if we want to pursue it, to collaborate on cultural heritage facilities. Of course, we have the KMP, but its experience has shown over the past 20 years, or 20 to 25 years, it's been a very difficult asset for us to manage, and the board did give us direction to, dispose of it, and that's a work in progress. So as you run down that list of different types of facilities that we ourselves have or that other CAs have, it's something for us to think about whether we want to get into those kinds of lines of business, as it were, because they all relate to natural resource management and providing either passive or active recreational opportunities. So you can see on the right there some of the key questions that I've posed in the discussion paper that I'm interested in getting feedback on. So the second one having to do with the museum, and the third one having to do with portage routes, in that there is nobody actively managing portage routes within our jurisdiction. Is that something MVCA wants to do? Because goodness knows we do get calls about it. So, you know, is that something, a role we want to embrace and actively manage, or is it something collectively we're just willing to, you know, to not put a priority on? And I'm not saying that with any amount of judgment. It's just, you know, we can't be doing everything for everybody. So in terms of passive versus active, some conservation authorities have very developed kind of recreational facilities on their sites, including ski hills up in North Bay. But implicit in that is that you need to have staff resources. And one of the reasons why I put this to you is because when you think about the museum and the museum being embedded at the site at Milliken Tail, to the extent that we may be able to offer for-profit programming at that site may help us to fund other activities, other Category 3 activities. So I think we need to be really looking at what makes sense at our different properties. If there are, you know, potentially uses that we think make sense given the demand, the alternatives, you know, that may be available in the vicinity of them, the local demographics, what the sites are conducive to, and then if there's a business case for some of these things. But again, I'm looking to the board and by extension, you know, all of our member municipalities to help give us some guidance on this. So when it comes to the dams, it's been a, you know, an interesting thing to review. And I hope all of you get to read this section of the report, because at the end of the day, when I've, you know, finished doing the research on this, it really struck me that the dams we own because people basically asked us to, you know, would you build this dam, or would you assume ownership of this dam, or would you repair and take ownership of this dam? And you can see they all date back to primarily the 70s and then the early 90s, because at that time, a lot of these assets were coming to the end of their life, or issues were arising within the watershed. And we were still receiving 85% funding from the province. So as all of you know today, at most we get 50% on capital renewal, and our operating subsidy is in the order of 2 to 3%. So owning and maintaining and ultimately being responsible for the capital renewal of all these assets, the business case isn't what it was in the 70s. And so when I looked at these, and I had Euro review this, and I said, you know, what is the primary function of these dams? And to the extent that they, you know, their primary purpose is flood control or mitigation, or to support natural resources like fish spawning, I think we have a very clear case for saying, you know, this is an asset that collectively we want to continue to manage for the health of the watershed and in fulfillment of our mandatory, you know, programs and services. But we do have two facilities, one in Tay Valley, one in North Frontenac, that were built purely to maintain recreational water levels. And I think we need to take a look at those kind of facilities, because they are benefiting a very discrete population. And our funding model, the regulation does provide for us to, much like municipal drains, to, you know, allocate costs on a benefiting proportionate basis. Now, truth be told, those dams don't cost us a lot of money. it might be more, effort than it's worth to do that. But when you think about the asset renewal and the long-term life of those dams, I think we need to at least have the conversation. And that's why it's in the discussion paper. Not because I necessarily think that those two dams cost us a lot of money to operate and maintain, but because in principle, somebody else could come down the road, 15 years from now and ask us to build them a dam for recreational purposes. And I think it's important that we've had the conversation about philosophically, what's the role of the Conservation Authority? Is it to maintain recreational lake levels, or is it something other than that? So you can see the questions I've posed in the discussion paper there speak to this, but they also speak to hydro. At various times we get asked about this, and we have been approached in particular about the Carleton Place Dam. And I think it's an important question to ask. The analysis that was done at that time didn't seem to indicate that any of our dams, with the exception potentially of Carleton Place, had a whole lot of hydro potential. But, the climate's changing, flows change, economics change, the business case could evolve over time. And I think it's at least, again, worth having the conversation about philosophically, is this something MVCA is interested in, or is it something where we'd likely want to just turn the asset over to somebody else to manage? What are the pros and cons to us leasing, a dam structure for hydro purposes, or just disposing of the asset, which is, again, one of the key questions to be answered by this whole strategy. The other piece of this is we operate for MNRF 6 facilities, 5 of the 6, one's a weir. But we know for a fact over the years, MNRF has thought about potentially, unloading these assets, as it were. How do we feel about that? Would we take them on? And why would we take them on? And under what circumstances or conditions would we take them on? Because it would expand our asset base and the capital demands on the organization. So I think that, I view very much this land conservation strategy is very much like an official plan or corporate strategic plan. It's asking some big picture questions to get us thinking about where we want to go as an organization. The province has been fairly clear in the past 5 years that it wants us to hone in on our core mandate. And I've framed up this discussion paper to do exactly that. Here's what our core mandate is. Here's other things that we've been tasked to do over the years. Here's current state. What do we see us doing in the next 20 years on a policy basis as issues arise and we're offered properties or assets as they come in the door? So I think I just wanted to wrap up by letting you know the consultation program. So I've already been engaging with your member municipalities, and this morning I was just down at County of Frontenac giving a briefing down in Kingston there. I've already done outreach to the OFA and the Woodlot Association and a couple of more local, Climate Network Lanark. I was at Tay Valley last night. So I have meetings scheduled with all the municipalities into, I think you're the last one, Greater Madawaska in July. I think might even be August. Is it August? Yeah, so I think that's yours, Taylor. So going out and just, having this conversation with people, because in some cases, some municipalities could be potentially more affected than others by the answers to these questions. Once it comes to these documents come to the board in a couple of weeks, and I've got, confirmation on, yes, these are the right questions and the overall approach, then we'll do a formal circulation and advertising and do hopefully some local radio and print media uptake to get the conversation going and really try to understand from the greater community what role they see for conservation area or authority in this area. So at the end of the day, through all that consultation, my plan is to start drafting policy around this and to table draft policies in October to make sure that it can come for final approval at the December board meeting. So happy.
Thank you, Sally. You gave us a lot to think about there. Is there any questions for Sally at this point? I think Bev beat you to it. Bev?
So I guess maybe more a comment than a question, but you know, when I look at, you know, particularly the Mill of Kintail, which of course I have a special interest in, I think we have to be very careful with that mill because I would, you know, like to see a business case of how we could keep it. You know, I think it has potential. It's not advertised to its maximum. You know, as I keep harping on Robert Tate McKenzie, he's world famous. If you go to Scotland, they know all about him. He's the father of physio. He, you know, he's done some beautiful sculptures. So I think that, you know, there is potential to develop that site into a major tourist area, not only for local, but for national and international tourists. And the other thing, I know, Sally, I harp on this too, and I apologize for it, but it does contain a very valuable collection of artifacts and, you know, some items from Robert Tate McKenzie include some of his molds for some of his very famous sculptures and whatnot. And they are falling into disrepair because we cannot afford to put them in the climate controlled environment they require to really maintain them. So, you know, I was down there not too long ago and I thought, oh, those are looking even grubbier than I remember from the last time I was here. And, you know, whether that requires a special building for them to go into, I don't know. But I guess that's my comment on that.
Thanks, Bev. Stephen? Have to hit your button.
Just a comment on acquiring land. As a farmer, I know it's pretty easy to get land poor real quick. And even if we're not going to develop them, there's liability, there's beavers flooding out neighbors. You look after all that kind of thing. But I guess if it's key land, that's okay. But we don't have a lot of money to do that, I don't think. And I don't think any of the councils have a lot more to send to us. So I think we need to be careful what we do there. Just a comment.
Good point. Glenn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear on what we're being asked as a committee right now. You're just looking for feedback on the discussion paper and the consultation. You're not specifically looking for our comments today on what our future strategy should be. Is that right?
That's right. I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the questions I'm posing and
Yeah.
that the package I'm circulating, you know, is a good package for this kind of public engagement.
Yeah, so I'll park my feedback specifically on where I think we should be going. I have a few ideas there, but I think in terms of how you've laid it out and how it's presented, I think that's good. And I don't really have any recommendations on the consultation. I know there'll be a lot of interest in Stittsville. There's one new group in particular that's on a strategy to try to protect more natural areas through ownership, easements, land donations, whatever it might be. So I think this is going to spur a lot of really interesting discussion and feedback. So I'll be sharing it widely when it's ready with my community.
Thanks, Glenn. I did have one comment, Sally, if I could. This is going out to the general public, correct? For them to see. I wonder if we should better define the words preserve versus conserve. When you're using the two in tandem, I think there's sometimes confusion about what they mean. And before asking the questions on preserving land versus conserving land, if we could better define what those mean.
Yes.
So we do have a resolution with this one. If there's no more discussion on kind of the general direction and questions. Be it resolved that the Policy and Planning Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve release of the attached documents for public consultation in accordance with the consultation plan for development of a land conservation strategy as set out in this report. Can I get a mover? Taylor? And second, Cindy? All in favor? So that's carried and we'll bring it to the next board meeting. Excellent. Thank you, Sally. Hmm. And that's it. All right. So we need a motion to adjourn. There's lots of hands up. All in favor. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. See you on the 7th or 8th.
Or, I'm sure all the canoe